everybody. We are at an incredibly exciting time. It is, of course, against a backdrop of an immense challenge around the world, but it's an exciting time for electric vehicles. We are now truly moving towards this mass adoption of electric vehicles all over the planet. And the challenge and the critical part of that, of course, is to have an efficient charging management system, having protocols, having procedures, having a way in which that will all come together successfully and give people who are buying and using electric vehicles ease of use and for everything to connect up in the right way. So we're at a very exciting time for sure, but a very challenging time. So that mass rollout is in EV fleets, individual vehicles, we have commercial vehicle fleets, we're seeing the mass adoption of electric buses in many countries, and more and more sectors electrifying as we go through this year and into the next number of years. So we're going to start with a company, a brand that really understands electrification. They're one of the OEMs at absolutely the leading edge of progress and development in electrification, both with vehicles and with charging infrastructure. I don't want to take anything away from our keynote speaker, but for sure, I've been very impressed with Electrify America and the rollout of that in the United States. So perhaps we'll hear a bit about that in the keynote. So who is going to deliver this keynote? Well, it's Elke Temmer. She is Senior Vice President of Charging and Energy at Volkswagen Group Components. So I've not met Elke before, but I'm just about to, as you are, and I'm really looking forward to what I'm sure is going to be a detailed, fascinating, and I think very important keynote. So hello, Elke. Welcome to the platform, and we're really looking forward to hearing all about what you're up to. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Roger, for this really nice introduction. And I'm also really looking forward to hold my presentation here and discuss with you on the new normal and on the mass adoption of e-mobility. So, ladies and gentlemen, what do I want to talk about? It's really three important questions that I want to look for. First, where do we stand in 2021 in terms of e-mobility? Second, how will Volkswagen drive the transformation to e-mobility? And finally, what is the role of charging infrastructure in this endeavor? So let's start with a fundamental change that has taken place in recent weeks. So e-mobility is no longer the technology of the future, it's really now the technology of the present. So if you have seen recent numbers, you know what I'm talking about. More and more EVs can be seen on the roads, increasing numbers of customers are making the switch. And it's not only the high society, but it's really the middle of society now that is driving electric cars, neighbors, colleagues, friends. And when looking at the numbers, these are really compelling. So in Europe, overall sales of EVs, BEV and hybrids are more than tripled from Jan to September, despite coronavirus and against all general market developments. And if you look alone in Germany, nearly 200,000 BEVs were registered in 2020. And the Volkswagen Group really is a strong driver with a market share of about 30%. So we can say that really electric cars are becoming the new normal. And this holds true because e-mobility is fun to drive, suitable everyday use, and affordable right now. And there's another interesting finding. Private customers are changing faster than fleet customers. So while fleet normally hold a market share of about 65% in the overall market, it's only 50% in the overall electric car market. So there's still some room for improvement. I want to share some numbers from the Volkswagen Group to give you a little flavor of where we are and what we really are looking for. So in the years to come, we anticipate that, of course, e-mobility will gain more and more speed in Europe and worldwide. And we at Volkswagen have just launched the ID.3 and the ID.4. So our first model from a completely new all-electric vehicle family. And this is only the beginning. As you can see on the slide, by 2030, the group will offer about 70 all-electric models, and we will invest in the upcoming 5 years about 35 billion euros in e-mobility, 35. So, and to a large extent also in the European market. And we will bring all our models to Europe, China, and the US. We have just launched the ID.4 in China, and we are really delighted by the numbers we see. And overall, we plan to bring about 26 million BEVs to market from today until 2030. So we're really not talking small numbers, but really a big transformation. Yeah. So, and we as Volkswagen, we will continue with the largest e-mobility push. We believe in that market, and not only e-mobility, but of course driving also towards automotive. E-mobility for us is a key driver to achieve the goals of the European Green Deal. We still don't know exactly what the 55% target means for the automotive industry, but it's quite clear that we will have to further increase the share of EVs and plug-in hybrids by 2030. We at Volkswagen are ready and willing to do so. And with the new MEB platform, we have already developed the technological backbone for this. So the MEB really covers a wide range of segments, as you can see, from compact to sedan. The whole ID family will be based on this platform. So it's Audi, it's Skoda, it's Seat, and its Volkswagen Commercial Cars will also launch models based on this platform. And we are sharing this platform already with partners like Ford. So, and this is a big change all over. So with that MEB, it really enables us to drive enormous economies of scale and thus create the basis for making EVs accessible and affordable to many people. And at the same time, the MEB exploits the full possibilities of e-mobility. So this is high ranges of up to 550 kilometers and fast charging up to 125 kV. A new level of digitalization allows updates and upgrades over the air, more space than ever in the interior, and a low total cost of ownership, already on par or even lower compared with combustion engine vehicles. And it's exactly this which are the striking arguments for both private customers and fleet managers. We currently notice increasing interest by companies in our ID family, and I'm sure we see more and more demand from this side in the near future. So as you can see, we are putting the cars on the road. Customers are ready to switch. Now what we really need is adequate charging infrastructure. A sufficient charging infrastructure is absolutely crucial for the success of e-mobility and the Green Deal in general. And this is the only thing I'm a little bit worried about at the moment. Now, currently, public charging is really on its way to become a bottleneck. And you know, according to earlier calculations, Europe will at least have 30 million electric vehicles on its road by 2030. And the EU Commission estimated that we will need about 3 million public charging points by 2030. Currently, we are at 200,000. And of course, it's not only about numbers, just as Roger already mentioned, it's also about quality, allocation, charging power. So I think it's really worthwhile having a deeper look at the impact on Europe's charging infrastructure. First of all, we need to take into account that the European Green Deal will raise the pressure. New tighter CO2 goals will bring additional EVs on our roads. And of course, additional EVs will require additional charging points. And these cars are not yet included in any scenario. Furthermore, with that, we will see a general shift from home charging to more public charging. Why is that? It's because in the future, when we really look for the whole customer group, we have more and more customers who won't have their own parking space. And we believe that more than 50% of all car drivers in Europe won't have any access to home charging. So currently, we think that 80–85% will charge at home or at work. This will change as we really need to find a solution for the ones who don't have any access to home charging. So this means that we believe that high power charging will become a great change to improve charging infrastructure in a short period of time, and its importance will even rise. Fast chargers with more than 100 kilowatt hours are able to charge 10 times as many EV cars as standard AC chargers, and vehicle technology is already developing to higher charging power. So this will be something we really need to think about: how much high power charging do we need and how much AC charging. So it's highly reasonable to shift the focus to fast charging and expand the HPC network to urban areas. The more, the better. So to sum it up, by 2030, we will need 3 million chargers, plus or minus, a significant number and still to be defined. We therefore have to dramatically accelerate the expansion of public charging infrastructure throughout Europe. Even the HPC scenario will pose a major challenge. And in the non-HPC scenario, we will have to install up to 1,000 new charging points per day starting from now. Let me just repeat, 1,000 charging points every single day up to 2030. So it's really time to think about a comprehensive and powerful action plan for charging infrastructure throughout Europe. And here's my proposal. First of all, both the EU and its member state should set up a master plan for all use cases of charging. In other words, official documents stating precisely what needs to be done. That includes clear measurable goals, attractive financial incentives, and a focus on fast charging. Second, the EU Recovery Fund offers a unique window of opportunity to invest heavily into charging infrastructure. So the EU will soon provide billions of euros and should make sure that a fair share will be channeled to charging infrastructure. And finally, I'm a strong supporter of binding scale-up rates for the member states. We will need the full commitment of all countries and more certainty with regard to 2030. I'm convinced with the right political framework, there's a good chance to build up a sufficient charging infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, the transformation towards e-mobility and the shift to renewable energy will bring challenges, but also new opportunities for both our industries. This is especially true when it comes to vehicle-to-grid. We will soon have millions of EVs on the street. All of them are equipped with the battery, offering a growing storage capacity. At the same time, energy providers and network operators are faced with increasing volatility due to renewables. With that in mind, vehicle-to-grid is a perfect match. It offers the flexibility highly needed by the energy system. It helps to exploit the full potential of renewables instead of switching them off in times of oversupply. And thus, it will accelerate the transformation towards 100% renewable energy. And vehicle-to-grid also offers a lot of business opportunities. For example, according to a recent study, fleet managers could generate up to 1,400 euros per vehicle by using vehicle-to-grid. So if you manage to join together transport and energy, everyone will benefit: companies, customers, and the climate. In other words, renewable energy and e-mobility are two sides of the same medal. And of course, there's still a long way ahead to turn vehicle-to-grid into reality, but it's possible. Our cars will very soon be technically ready for this. Smart grids are already explored by many network operators. And what we need is a legal framework across Europe that supports the introduction of vehicle-to-grid. The Netherlands are a great example of how to promote this future technology. They already act future-oriented, consistent, and effective. And more countries should follow this example. In Germany, for example, we are currently discussing about paragraph 14a, a small but important step towards vehicle-to-grid. This, if it is done right, can serve as an accelerator, but also as a major setback in the modernization of the networks. So it's quite important to act thoroughly and well considered. And in the long run, we will need an EU legislation on vehicle-to-grid to foster these technologies all over Europe and in a proper manner. Otherwise, we will end up with a Europe-wide patchwork and a wasted opportunity. I would therefore like to finish with a positive vision. Let's build an intelligent and pioneering system for mobility and energy that is really based entirely on renewables. It would be a global showpiece for Europe as a center of industry and a long-term profit pool for our continent. We have to take what it takes. I'm really looking forward to the debate. Thank you.
Wow. Elke, that was absolutely amazing. Some huge numbers in there as well. I mean, I've made some notes. 35 billion euros, 26 million BEVs by 2030, and 70 all electric models by 2030. You've got a lot of work coming your way, haven't you? And the other one, 1,000 charging points per day. Somebody somewhere in and around Volkswagen is going to be very busy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Roger. It's amazing and it's really incredible numbers, but it really shows that we really take it serious and this is the way we're going for.
Yes, I'm delighted to see it. So thank you so much. That was a fantastic keynote. Look forward to talking to you on the panel. But for now, thank you very, very much. That was wonderful.
Thank you, Roger.
So there you are. That's our first keynote. And we have a second keynote before we get to our panel. And now we're going to hear from Doron Frenkel, who's the CEO of Drives, with a Z on the end. An incredible company. They're a solutions provider in and around this space of electrification and specifically charging infrastructure and development. So Doron is going to give us his flavor, his sense of where we are. I'm sure it's going to be similar in one sense to where we've gone with what's happening at Volkswagen. So Doron, welcome to the stage. Please tell us what's happening, and we look forward to your wonderful keynote. So it's all yours, my friend.
Hello. Thank you, Roger, and thank you, Elke. It's amazing to see how much progress there is in the market and how much progress we have in the VW front. My name is Doron Frenkel. I'm the CEO and founder of Drives. Thank you for having me. A bit about Drives. We've started about 8 years ago and developed a software which serves as the operating system for EV charging providers The system is end-to-end, but it's modular, so you can pick and choose your models, and it's flexible to cope with the disruption in the field. We are currently managing tens of thousands of chargers directly, hundreds of thousands in roaming. We have over 700,000 drivers on the platform. We support over 170 different types of chargers, and we sell in over 20 countries. We have large customers like EVgo, the largest fast public charging network in the US, CSB eCars, which is the incumbent utility in the UK. So we have customers that are either utilities, OEMs, gas and oil companies, and standalone service providers. If we look at the challenges that we have behind EV charging, so we want to have mass scale adoption. The first thing is operational excellence. We want to have the experience for the drivers as they have in gas stations or even a lot better. Currently, when you approach EV chargers, a lot of them are not working appropriately. So people are going to the charger and it doesn't work and it frustrates. So what we figure out is how to resolve a lot of it. We have algorithms to solve things automatically with self-healing. We have developed a system that enables the business flexibility that is needed in the market. So you need billing and you need to be flexible to support different business models. You need to remember that we have the customers. So the drivers are the most important piece of the puzzle. We want happy drivers and then we have a good industry. And we also need to have proper solutions to the fleets and the other stakeholders. The next thing is about energy optimization. The EV charging is a challenge to the grid, but we need to see how we, with digital services, solve this challenge or even use that to solve a much bigger problem, which is the energy challenge, the overall energy challenge. And we need the system to be scalable, so we can't make a system that will not be able to expand dramatically as we see the market is growing. And all of that is in a market that keeps on changing, so we need to be open and future-proof. The overall system has several sections, so we need a system that supports the CPO, the charge point operators, and the e-mobility service providers, both the charger management, the technical operation, the energy management, and also robust billing and roaming. We need a system that will be white level to support the different hosts, the different fleets, automakers, gas stations, and the complex ecosystem around EV charging. And a system that can serve the driver whenever they charge, whether it's at home, work, public, semi-public. And beyond that, it's about a system that can manage the power, that can connect to the local microgrid if needed, can integrate with the demand response. And what we do, we manage both the chargers, but also batteries and renewables. Many say about the EV charging, that it's easy and you have many solutions, but you need to look at what fits you. So it's not only about operating the chargers, it's really easier said than done. If you look at the transactions, a lot of them are not starting. And what you see is that there are so many functions that you can solve remotely. So our system knows how to resolve most of the issues remotely, automatically, before even the drivers or the operators have seen the issue. And if you look at the fleet scenarios, it's also a complex environment. So you have a back-to-home fleet and depot charging. In the back-to-home, you need to compensate the driver with a financial piece of the corporate. And if it's the workplace charging, it's all about tools to the facility manager, energy management, or to the fleet manager that cares about scheduling and when the cars are ready and how to make sure that the cars are ready to charge when needed. And all of that needs to be connected to the public charging. So in order to do that, you need a platform which can cope with different challenges. It should be out of the box, it should be modular, configurable, should be customizable, and also can adapt to the needs of the customers using either self-development or even APIs on top of the platform. So if you look at the overall challenge that we see that EV charging introduces major challenge on the grid. But what we are looking for is to look at that as a solution to a bigger problem. So if we use the vehicles, either in a V2G or more than that, as a balancing to the grid, we can make a major change and a major chain improvement on the grid and actually a better planet to live on. And we believe that together the different players in the market. Now that the market starts to ramp up and grow and actually grow dramatically, that's the time to team up and make a major change that will impact the life of our children. It's a really once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us to affect the planet and provide additional services that not only will assist in the mobility revolution, but which actually create better and stable world for our children. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you so much for that, Doron. That's amazing. Again, big numbers, 20 countries, 700,000 drivers. What I'm definitely hearing from both yourself and from Elke is we are now working towards economies of scale. And I guess that's so critical towards utilization and profitability. So, yeah, do you want to say anything quickly more on that before we go to the panel?
Yeah, I think that's the number one challenge in public charging is to make sure that we have enough cars on the roads, enough drivers, so to get to the right utilization and manage it properly. And this is why we see more and more people are getting into the fleet business, because it's more kind of, the utilization is clear and you can manage it properly and you have a lot of energy. So I think that you should follow the energy track, where you charge more, where is more energy around it, and then support that as much as possible.
Yes. Yes, don't tell us too much more, because we've got the panel coming up and we can explore a number of these things all together. So for now, Doron, thank you so much. And we'll shortly go to the panel session. So we'll pop up there in just a moment. So stay with us. Well, we've got a treat for you now, and a fantastic panel, a lineup of individuals that really know their stuff, companies absolutely at the heart of the electric vehicle revolution. We've heard two fantastic keynotes. We're going to hear from those individuals again within our panel session. And we're going to be talking about how are the activities and actions now, the companies putting all of this together. What is the architecture of this mass adoption of electric vehicles in and around the charging proposition? So who have we got on the panel? Well, we're going to start with Imogen Pierce. She is Head of Experience Strategy at Arrival. There is Imogen arriving on your screen. And then Frank Meyer is SVP at Future Energy, Home and E-Mobility Global at E.ON, CEO there. Elias Povri is CBO and co-founder of Verta Global. He's just arrived in our screen. Alberto Piglia is head of e-mobility at NLX. Truly significant company there in Italy. Welcome to Alberto. Elke, you heard from in the keynote session earlier from Volkswagen, joins us. And then finishing our panel is Doron Frankel, again, our second keynote that we heard from. So this is truly a fantastic group of people, I can assure you. So I'm not going to ramble on. I'm going to go straight to it. I'm going to go to Imogen and ask Imogen from Arrival, how do you answer the demand from fleet owners, Imogen? You're a relatively new company. You're learning all the time, but you're straight in there with some fantastic activity. So how do you answer, in your view, how do you answer the demand from fleet owners for electric vehicles?
So just as a bit of background for those who aren't familiar with Arrival, we're an electric vehicle startup founded in around 2015. So actually quite old for a startup, but very, very young for an automotive world. And we're focusing primarily on commercial vehicles, so electrifying both buses and van fleets. And so for us, the challenge is really interesting. Given that we've only been in existence since 2015, and also given this opportunity to really rethink what an electric vehicle is and what it needs to be, and if this vehicle was created from scratch for the first time, how can it best serve its customers? And so that means that we've worked exceptionally closely with a number of large fleet operators, as well as some of the smaller fleet operators as well. And in that process, we're understanding sort of what does it mean to be a driver on a day-to-day basis? How can we create a vehicle which essentially is their place of work? It has to serve as an office. And how can we help manage the transition from a petrol or diesel fleet to an electric fleet? So we understand things like drive cycles, how that varies even from a city-by-city basis. For example, in London, the average sort of journey a UPS driver might do is around 30 miles, but is much, much more outside of London. And so really just using this opportunity to foster fantastic relationships with our customers so that they can be really pivotal in informing what the overall sort of not only the vehicle looks like, but also the services and solutions that need to sit around it to support it as well.
Right. So it's basically, in a nutshell, know your customer, get to understand precisely what people need, and therefore, that's what you construct both in the vehicle platform and the charging proposition. Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you, Imogen. Great start. So let's have a chat with Frank. So Frank, we've seen mass adoption in many ways of electric vehicles in China, but how can Europe move faster on that EV take up and charging rollout? Seems to be a little bit sort of staggered, a little bit fragmented up to now. From the perspective of what you're doing, how can we improve that and get on with the job a bit quicker?
Well, first of all, I think actually Europe is now really moving quite fast. If you look at September this last year, 2020, first time we had a new car electric vehicle adoption of 25%. This is actually enormous for Europe. Just a year ago, it has not even been half of that. Then you have actually cases like Norway in Europe, which are leading the pack in the sense of that already more than half of the cars newly registered are electric. So this is more cars than any combustion engine. So we have proof points it works. And actually, we move actually now really, really fast in Europe, and we get ahead. This is actually quite visible. E.ON is present in Europe in 11 countries. We work in 11 countries, so we see the demand rising extremely and immensely. I'm personally very happy about that because obviously e-mobility is the future, and green mobility is important to make our CO2 targets reality and save the planet at the end of the day. And so in that sense, Europe is moving fast. And if there is potentially one thing good about the Corona crisis, then that it helps us to invest and boost new structures like e-mobility. What can we do even more to increase and be faster? I think in the first discussion you have heard that the OEMs will actually boost their investments and bring a lot of new models into the market. That I think is fantastic. I think the infrastructure investments that we are currently doing all over the place are good. I see many individual, however, country-specific initiatives still, like in Germany and other countries. I would love to see a more bold European approach, because infrastructure still isn't profitable, so we need to have a joint approach and investment. If you look at Norway, for instance, that has been done in a very bold approach there. So how can we do this in Europe across the countries? I think in many countries it's beyond that, not about money, because there is currently lots of subsidies that help. It's actually then rather about reducing bureaucracy, speaking for instance about Germany. How do you get permissions to install your infrastructure that you need? How, as a tenant in a tenant house, how can you actually have the right to install your wall box? These are actually all-day questions which currently hinder us to adopt e-mobility even faster. And I think last, I want to note also telling the people the positive story about e-mobility, because there are still so many which are hesitant and have fears, which to a large degree are not real. For instance, anxiety of reach of the cars, while actually more than 80% of your trips are less than 30 kilometers, and you have cars with 300, 400, 500 kilometers of reach. This is actually not saying it cannot be a problem for single use cases, but it's not a mass problem. And educating people about that, telling stories, what is already possible, and how great actually and fun e-mobility is, I think will help.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with you, Frank. And I think it was interesting when Imogen opened up there in that explanation of Arrival, how quickly and fundamentally they have focused on understanding the customer and building the proposition in and around that. But your work, yes, in many countries, this coupling of energy with mobility is absolutely what it's all about. And it's great to see. So Elias, I'd like to come to you, please. What sort of services do you think we need to be offering now to enable this mass rollout? What are the practical steps? What are the things we need to give people and equip people with from the perspective of your business?
Well, first of all, when you said Arrival is a kind of a newcomer in the industry, being founded in 2015, I think that's due to the industry being so young. So we call ourselves one of the established players, and we were founded in 2014, so only 1 year older. So this is maybe showing how the world is moving fast. We are now one of the big players in Europe, I think the biggest by geographical footprint as an EV charging platform. And when we look at the services, that's maybe one of the key things that Frank already kind of referred to. The world is global, the world is European, and so on. So first of all, the services we provide are more and more on a global level. There are no such things as national EV charging services, but we have to serve the whole Europe and even beyond. That's the one thing. Also, in terms of the driver view, but also in terms of the business view. So if you are in EV charging business, usually you become bigger than one country, especially in Europe where the borders are very close. The second thing is that when we look at the users, especially if we look at the fleets, we want the end user, who is actually the driver in the fleet, to have the full user experience, starting from when we charge at the depot, when we charge at the workplaces, in public spaces, even in homes. So this all has to be integrated into one user experience. So it's easy to handle financially, that you get all your reports, all your accounting built in one place, but also it's the user experience that matters. Like said, the fleet drivers are also EV drivers themselves. And if we look at the fleets, we can say that a leasing company leasing hundreds of thousands of cars is a fleet itself. So the fleet services are very wide in this perspective. And maybe the third one is that we should be kind of worried or wary of how the regulation is going on. At the moment, we are not in a single market regulation in terms of, for instance, value-added tax and so on. So the players who are here to stay, they need to serve the whole Europe in a consistent, compliant way, where we can handle these cross borders and can handle all the details of a regulation that is not existing yet. So I think these are the three main topics where we are concentrating as one of the bigger companies in the industry. And of course, talking about the evolution of EVs and electrification, I want to add that I just came from Lapland this morning, in Finnish Lapland, and last week the temperatures were like minus 34 degrees Celsius, which is quite cold, I would say. And we were driving there with e-sleds, e-skidoos. They were not in the warm place for storage, but they were out there, and they just started, and they're really, really competitive in terms of the power and what you can use them for, compared to traditional ones. So I think we are underestimating the capabilities of electrification as a whole. And by the way, these e-sleds also can charge with Type 2 chargers of our company. So perfect integration in all areas.
Wow. That's amazing. Lapland. That's definitely cold. And we're going to talk about fleets in a moment, actually, when we talk to Alberto. But you mentioned being sort of an early player in this and startups, etc. I don't know what this makes me, but I was involved with an electric startup in 2007. That makes me feel really ancient when you've described some of what you did there, Elias. But listen, let's come on to Alberto. Buongiorno, Alberto.
Buongiorno.
Yes, we've talked about fleet there. Or rather, Elias did. How can we win fleet business? NLX are a very significant company, and you're heading up the e-mobility. So I guess you've got some pretty good plans already underway about building fleet business. But give us your sense of how that's happening, please, Alberto.
Yeah, thanks. So basically, I'd like to start by saying what we did with our own fleet, because when we started, NLX started activities in 2017, the first thing that we told us was, the first thing we need to do is convert our fleet into these, because you need to walk the talk, and like you would say, Roger. So what we did is that we went to our fleet services, and convincing your colleague is actually sometimes tougher than convincing an external customer. So we went through the entire process of what we think you should do. So we did the analysis of the fleet that we could convert, doing the mileage, the analysis, and so forth, and decided that we could convert actually 30% of the operational fleet that we were bidding in that time. That's more than 1,500 cars. Then we studied where to put infrastructure in the offices and what sort of infrastructure we had to put, and then so we did that part. So telling our colleagues which were the cars to change, and we did a rational analysis. So it was convenient for them during the lifetime, because a business customer is a rational customer. Then, when you talk about fleets, you actually talk to, I would say, 3 different customers. Okay, there's a CEO or CMO who's maybe interested in communication of sustainability, so you need to tackle that piece. You need to tackle the end user, so the user, and there we offer the user the opportunity, so our colleagues, the opportunity to charge in the office, at home, in the public charging network that we are installing and that has strong interoperability agreements now with everyone. So through our app, these people can charge basically everywhere. And obviously, we needed to provide same level of services that is given by other engines, let's put it this way, to the service. So our service guys see exactly what are the consumption that we do in the public space, in the private space, and at home. So that's the experience that we did on ourselves. We packaged this experience, we packaged it in a product, and we started going out offering this service to B2B customers in the 30+ geographies where we operate in Italy, Spain, Europe, Latin America, and US. And I think that's exactly the approach you need to have. You need to understand the customer needs. It's a rational customer. You need to offer the different options to these customers. It's a complex customer because it's not just an end user, and then you need to just go for it.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot that's important in what you just said. I think practicing what you preach is a fundamental, and I think starting with your own fleet, and then from that experience, taking it out to potential customers, it must give you great credibility. And what I would say from listening to you describe that, Alberto, is I do think governments across the geography, I'll put it like that, of Europe, should be investing much more in their own electric fleets. If we're talking about political ambition, build back better, build back green, whether it's from Brussels, whether it's in Berlin, whether it's in Birmingham or wherever, it should start with, I think, the government bodies and the government fleets switching to electric, to lead by example, as clearly you have in building your client base. So that's really interesting. Thank you for that, Alberto. Elke, we heard your barnstorming keynote with those huge numbers on what Volkswagen are doing, and you alluded to something I think very significant and particularly important, which is the integration of renewables with charging of vehicles, with electric vehicles. So how do you see that actually working in practice? There are some challenges with that, but how do you see this migration towards much more renewables and storage in and around the electric vehicle ecosystem and charging system? What can you tell us about that, please?
Yeah, Roger, I think there are 2 things. The one is on the production side of the cars, and the second is on the charging side. Let me just state, first of all EVs have already a better carbon footprint than any combustion car. And I'm very happy to see that more and more this is coming into the public and overall agreed, and all other statements which show whatever weird numbers are really diminishing. And I'm really happy to see that this becomes the new normal and is accepted. And we at Volkswagen are really focusing on way to zero, and which means that first of all, we look at our production. How can we ensure that this carbon footprint is really decreasing, and there we really made already enormous progress. So first of all, with the new ID.3, we already managed to have a new, more efficient battery system with a new cathode material. So this is already decreasing the energy needed. Yeah. Then we have also agreed with our cell supplier that he is only using renewable energy. And we also use at our Zwickau plant where we produce the ID.3, we already use renewable energy to produce that. So really looking at the production itself to really focus on renewable energy and really getting a lower carbon footprint there. And then, of course, it's on the other side when using the car, then, of course, the overall energy mix, how much renewables do you have, really have an important impact on the overall CO2 reduction. I mean, in Eindhoven University of Technology in September 2020, they did a research and in the study and came to the conclusion, if it is fully charged with renewable energy, then electric cars emit at least 10 times less CO2 than combustion cars. So this is really a significant number, so 10 times less. And this is why we think the transformation of transport needs to go hand in hand with the transformation in renewable energies. So, and this is also why Volkswagen already is creating its own products, for example, with our subsidiary Elli. We already offer also green electricity to run EVs because we think we really need to provide the customer with a full package where he can decide what to take and what not. But renewable energy is definitely a key to make EVs even more sustainable and really reduce the carbon footprint. And Volkswagen is definitely a strong supporter of this energy transition.
That's very good to hear, and almost sounds like you're becoming an energy company. But the thing I would just, if I may, just add to that is it's always been, I believe, a twin imperative in regard to the pursuit of electric vehicles. What I mean by that is, of course, significant and as best we can, total CO2 reduction or mitigation, but also air quality. And so I think whilst we're working hard, you know, upstream in terms of battery production, mining, and mineral processing, etc., to create that improvement in CO2. Let's not forget, if a vehicle does not have a tailpipe at the back of it, then in its location, at its point of use, there's nothing coming out, and that's a significant issue. Whether we say it's the same issue in terms of importance as climate change, that's for another time as a discussion. But there's unquestionably zero tailpipe emission, and I think that's important. Can I just make a quick cheeky suggestion, by the way, Elke? Of all the manufacturers, established car companies, I think you have the best chance to just slightly change your name in terms of the future. All you need to do, Elke, is take the K out and put a T in so that it's Volkswagen rather than Volkswagen. What do you think?
I will discuss this with our CEO.
Yeah, I'm sure a few people won't like the idea, but it's just a suggestion. So, look, before we open up...
But you're right, Roger. No, you're absolutely right. Beside all what I already mentioned, you're right. It's also important to really look at the air pollution, the smog we have in the big cities. And, of course, also there, EVs make a big difference.
Yes, absolutely. Well, look, we're nearly through all of our panel there. We're going to talk to everybody collectively. So I hope along this way you're learning a lot about who these individuals are, what their companies are about, and how they might help you, and how they're working with each other. And obviously, you know, they want to work with you too, if that's what you're looking to understand here. So let's go to our last panelist, Doran. Doran is CEO of Drives. You've heard his keynote a moment ago. So I'd like to ask Doran, what do you see? How do you see this EV ecosystem evolving over the next few years? Is it going to be evolution, or is it going to be something of a revolution, Doran? What are you seeing? What do you think?
I think it's actually a combination. So we are providing digital services around EV charging in across Europe, in North America, in Latin America, and in the Far East. And what we are looking at is data. So we have data of customers for over 7 years. And when you look at the data, you see that it's still surprising us. So it's, for instance, fleets. We have a lot of fleets on the platform, and you see each fleet behaves differently, each type of fleet. So what's needed is, first of all, to understand that the drivers are the most important piece of the puzzle, and the fleet managers as well. And when you're looking at the drivers, they need smooth paths. They need an easy journey. And an easy journey will enable us to get as many drivers and as many chargers, and then we can manage the energy in an appropriate way to save even the planet, which we have a unique opportunity to do. So when you look at the data, then you understand that if you look at workplace charging, it started by just putting the chargers. Now, when you have a lot of chargers, you have a challenge of the energy. So the capacity of what we have in our building is not enough in order to support the chargers. We must add batteries. We must manage the amount of flexibility that we have within the building to support the chargers. Otherwise, replacing the transformers is too much. So it's about looking at what the drivers need, but also looking at the infrastructure. And you need tools. You need the right tools, and you need the scalable tools to support this revolution. And it also needs to be integrated, because fleets will not change in a day. We'll still have both EVs and other solutions, and we need to make sure that it's integrated, that it's easy to use. We need to make sure that we integrate the solutions across the team here, even if we are competitors. We need to find a way that things work together, that roaming works fine. So we introduced roaming in the US with the OCPI protocol, which is a European protocol, and we've integrated EVgo, our customer, which is a large public charging network, with ChargePoint. And so those activities of integrations, working with the right protocols, some of them are from Europe, like OCPI and OCPP. Some of them are from the US, like OpenADR for energy management. So we need to look at how we globally making it together a change. And whether it's a revolution, we see the revolution is happening, but the revolution needs some kind of evolution. And once you make the change, you can come back. So you won't buy a car which is not an EV if everyone buys an EV. So what we see in many cases, that the ramp up is really extremely high once things are happening. And it's like island and positions. We see in some countries it gets faster, and when it gets faster, it gets really fast. So my expectations is when we will get to the tipping point, we'll see mass deployment, and we'll need to cope with the mass deployment. And so we need to support the infrastructure a bit before we have the entire ecosystem ready. So we are even a bit late in some cases.
Yeah, I mean, you've just reminded me of a quote I often like to use, so forgive me if anyone's going to groan when they hear me say it. It's from a German economist called Rüdiger Dornbusch, and he said many things. He famously said, though, things change slower than you thought they would, but then things change faster than you thought they could. And I think in the context of the electric vehicle proposition, as I mentioned, I was a startup myself in 2007. You know, we had the EV1 with GM many years ago, different iterations of EVs over the decades, one way or the other. And it could be easy for people to think or say, well, it's just another one of those, it'll slow down, or there'll be a problem, or there'll be an issue. It's not the case now. This is where things are accelerating fast. But Doran, thank you so much for that. That gives us a really nice coverage of everybody said. Now, what I'm thinking is there may well be some people watching this who are policymakers, people in government. Who knows? Maybe Mr. Timmermans from the EU is watching. So if you are, Mr. Timmermans, good afternoon. So I'm going to ask a cheeky question of each of our panel here that may be helpful to you or anyone else looking at shaping policy. So I'm going to come back to you, Imogen. What's one specific policy barrier that you would like to see addressed that could accelerate the uptake of EVs? So I'm putting you on the spot. I'm asking for just the one. What would you like to see some of our bureaucrats, administrators, politicians fix?
Well, I think certainly in the UK, a huge barrier for our fleet customers is that they exist in depots. Those depots are normally rented on a reasonably long-term lease, but they don't own those depots. So the incentives to upgrade the connection to the grid is not necessarily there. So if there was some sort of magic policy wand that could remove that issue and make it an incredibly easy transition to upgrade a depot, that would be a tremendous help for our customers.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to pick on you. I'm going to take your theme there. The magic policy wand now, Frank, is in your hands. What is the one policy you're desperate to see addressed? You've waved your wand. What did you say for the spell?
I would have a couple of ideas, but if I need to say one thing, Frank. then I would name bureaucracy, because in the current situation we are in, money is not that much a problem. We have really decent subsidies which are helpful and needed. But people sometimes forget that there still needs to be a complex service to be delivered. And this is what we do. We actually see ourselves as the ones that make the energy transition as easy as possible for everyone, for millions of customers in Europe, 50 million customers in Europe. And this is bringing installations to customers. This is mounting a wall box. This is upgrading the network. All these things, sometimes if you make a nice graph and say we need 10 million or 100 million EVs in Europe and 10 million in Germany or whatever, people tend to forget. And the first calculation behind these graphs is then how much money do we need? Money is very important, but the practical things, how to reduce bureaucracy, how to allow that everybody who wants to install a wall box has the right to do it, how to make clear that you get the right to upgrade your networks and put infrastructure where it is needed. This is I think, a real pain point still that politics and policies can tackle and should tackle.
Yeah, okay, less red tape. I mean, I would have a little bit of hope that we can see some of that, because what we've learned in the last 10 months or so, haven't we, is that if we need to act quickly and get things done because we face a huge collective problem, we can, you know, and people that would have taken a year to make decisions made it in a day. So I think the evidence is there that, you know, where there's a will, there's a way. So yeah, Frank, for that. Thanks for that, Frank. Elias, have you come across one thing that's getting in your way that you want to see changed in terms of that policy barrier, if there is one? Can you give us one?
I think there is a single one. So if we look at the new car sales, EVs are already 10% of new car sales in Europe, and they will be 15% by the end of the year. So people want them. People really want these EVs, but what's the problem? The problem is to provide decent services on a European level, and now we're coming to the one single point. The single point is single market policies. So basically, we are still struggling with national policies, let's say Eichrecht in Germany, that are dividing the market and make it very difficult for European companies to grow European-wide, and from there to have a position in a global competition. So the single market policy, and maybe one of the ways to do it is that, let's say, alternative fuels directive is now under revision, things like that. These directives should be regulations instead of directives, so they would be implemented immediately the same way in each country. And I think this single market policy is the key to provide cost-efficient services on a European level without having to tamper with the legislation of each country. And this also implies with the VAT, taxation, things like this. So there are a lot of things that we could unify in Europe that we are not doing at the moment.
Okay,
so I think
good.
That's the one thing.
Lots of scope for improvement. Alberto, the magic bureaucratic get rid of something wand is in your hand. What are you wishing for?
I reinforce what Ines was saying, bureaucracy. We started public plans in Italy, Spain, and Romania, and we are installing on a weekly basis more or less 60, 70 charging points every week. We're installing them in many cities, many municipalities in 3 different countries. We're installing in private space basically all around Europe. When you talk to colleagues from Germany, from France, from Norway, I mean, you see that there is rules and regulation that change town by town. So this is an absolute operational nightmare to manage. And so I think we need to get with the magic wand there, because I think the targets are clear. Everybody is following those targets. I think car manufacturers, as we are seeing also from Volkswagen, are investing heavily into electric mobility. We need the infrastructure in place. We are putting capital to do it. We've got, we as a company are investing a lot. We've got a lot of people working on it. But when it takes 200 days to get the opportunity from when you start the request to have an active charging point, that is a barrier. So that is the fundamental point. It can take 200 days in big. If you start going in big cities where there are also architectural limitations, it is a challenge, because there's a lot of entities that can stop your infrastructure. So that's what we're talking about. So yeah. Okay. It's not stopping the infrastructure, because I think, for example, we started from basically in Italy from a few charging points here and there, and we're now at 13,000 charging points in 2.5 years. So that's a massive work. But yeah. It doesn't. But
in fairness, Alberto, to some of the legislators and bureaucrats you mentioned, you do have a lot of very lovely buildings in Italy, so you do have to look after them. I can sort of understand that. Elke, I'd like to come to you next. You mentioned in your keynote a target of an ambition of where you're looking to have 1,000 chargers a day being installed. So clearly you need to be getting on with it, as we talked about briefly earlier. Because you're such a big company, you must have a lot of clout. I'm sure Herbert Diess could just pick up the phone to Mrs. Merkel and say, hi, can you fix this for me, please? What's the one thing that's in the way as you see it at the moment, if I can ask you that?
No, Roger, you're absolutely right. We are dedicated to the transformation to e-mobility, and the one really most crucial barrier that hinders people to not buying EV cars is that there's not sufficient charging infrastructure into place. And what the one thing that we would wish for is really a global master plan for charging, so both on EU level and on member states. We already have that on the German level, and we see that this has already delivered quite some promising results, but it's not sufficient. So definitely we need one global EU master plan so that we can really say, okay, this has to be in place, this will be in place. And I also think if there is this really pressure, then this could also then really help reducing the bureaucracy that everybody here already mentioned, which I definitely can only support. But I think we really need to set up targets. We really need so much more infrastructure if we want to sell our 26 million BEVs within the next years.
Yes, well, as I said, hopefully the right people are listening to this. So, Doran, would you like to finish this off? Yeah, I hope so too. Doran, what would you like? What do you think needs to change? What have you experienced that's getting in the way?
So, as the last panelist, and which I agree with everything, and I want to add some additional angle to it, I think that utilization of the public network is still too low. I think that we need more vehicles on the road. Therefore, we need more incentives for the drivers. Once we have enough drivers, we have the right business models for all of us to make money. So I will look at incentives to the drivers, to the fleets, and making sure that taxation is still low at the beginning until the market ramp up. We need a tipping point. And in order to get to the tipping point, we need the incentives. We need that the governments will assist in this transition. And it's not only because of the driving and the money. We need it for our planet. And we see certainly in this COVID period that some other things are not less important than making money. It's changing our planet to the best, to a better position, therefore moving the EVs, and we need the drivers. So yes, that's my vote.
Yes, no, well, a great vote. And funnily enough, a certain American OEM used Malcolm Gladwell, the author of The Tipping Point, in their recent messaging. I saw it at CES. So yes, we are at that tipping point. I'm going to cheekily add in my own, if I may. I think what we need across Europe, and I think it should be driven by the EU or ASEA, is a continuity of the switch from combustion engine to electrification. I think it's crazy having deadlines of 2025, 2030, 2035, 2040 in different countries, because for manufacturers, that's a nightmare to deal with. Will certainly become one when we get to those dates. So I'd like to see the continuity of the end of combustion engine, and whether that's 2030 or 2035, it needs to be a rational, intelligent date and decision. So I would like to, if I cheekily just add that one in. So let's go to a general question, and just stick your hand up if you want to answer this question. What added value are we really going to see from everyone switching to electric vehicles? Because we've had 100 years of combustion engine, it's worked. People have had cars, they use them, they know how they operate. Dealers understand how it works. What are the real benefits that we're going to have in this? So yeah, Elias, you're putting your hand up.
If I start, of course, you're please continue this dialogue. First of all, of course, it's the clean air in the cities. That comes as an immediate impact. But secondly, we're talking about the CO2-free world, and this is maybe the biggest step towards CO2-free world, because it's not only changing the way we pollute while we drive, but it's also changing how we can produce a CO2-free energy, because the more and more renewables you add to the energy system, the more and more you need flexibility. And I think the EVs are the best possible and the biggest new source of flexibility in the energy system. So we can even say that the number of EVs is the barrier of adding enough renewables to have a CO2-free energy system that, of course, the European energy industry has committed way before 2050.
Yeah, and thank you. So Frank, can I quickly ask you on that then? Are you moving fast enough? Have you got enough momentum behind the change in your own business, you know, with what the shareholders expect and where the kind of profitability comes in this transition phase? Putting you on the spot there, Frank, I know, but...
First of all, indeed, there is, I think, a goal which is higher than e-mobility as such, and that is actually saving the planet, because global warming is the largest challenge that we face. And this can only be done by really making the energy transition work across the world and also across Europe. And then e-mobility is part of that energy transition. It only works with that. And actually, that's an opportunity, but also a responsibility to make this happen. And at the same time, it's also fun if you can actually do something so purposeful. Are we fast enough? My personal challenge with team is you can always be faster. But in the last years, actually, we achieved quite astonishing results in building up new business models. We incorporate e-mobility into the energy system. One thing is, for instance, the future energy home, which we provide to customers. So it's not only mobility charging, it's also generating your own energy with the PV, store it with a battery, and manage it effectively with a home energy management solution. There actually, within only 3 years, we built a profitable business. It's growing despite the Corona crisis with another 30%. We are already leading in Europe with more than 650 million revenues just last year, and it's continuing to grow. It's a profitable growth story, and it already last year provided 300,000 tons of CO2 savings, which actually will be done again and again every year. This is this year we will cross the 500,000 tons just with this business model. There is a lot more that we are doing as E.ON. And to give you a picture, this is 40 million trees you would need to plant in order to achieve that. So our own ambition is actually to build this future energy home forest year by year, more and more, and make it bigger and bigger. And e-mobility is part of that.
Yeah. 40 million trees, that's a big forest. Look, I'm going to do a wrap up, and I'm really grateful for everyone's contribution. I think it's been very, very intriguing, very interesting, and I hope, valuable to everybody watching. But before I do a very brief wrap up, I would actually like to ask our youngest panel member to give us a sense and flavour of what they're seeing happening, and is it happening quickly enough? Because Imogen, inevitably, compared to the rest of us, has got hopefully a lot longer on the planet. All the things we're talking about, the future and sustainability, etc. So, Imogen, would you like to have the final word from the panel on why this journey to electrification and getting charging up and running is so important?
I mean, that's quite a responsibility you've put on me there. Well, I was just sort of hearing the conversation as we kind of go on, and I think when we talk about electric vehicles and we talk about infrastructure, it's really easy to think that we're talking about private vehicles or just sort of what it means to the individual. But actually what this whole transition has allowed us to do is to start thinking not in discrete components, but to start to think of sort of mobility more generally, and actually sort of help us step towards what mobility as a service really means. So I think the thing that makes me excited about this particular time is, of course, the environmental benefits. That's like first and foremost the number one benefit, but also the fact that it's forcing us to refocus and to rethink what public transportation means, what access to sort of green spaces and reducing congestion could mean, and what opportunities that could provide as well. And as well as all of these other incredible business models around sort of distributed grids, or different ways of paying for energy and accessing energy. And so for me, electrification, I think, is just the start of it, and it's what it unlocks as a sort of broader ecosystem and this new wave of mobility that I think we can be really excited about for the sort of next 20 to 30 years.
Great. That's a lovely way to finish the start of something. So very simply, I'd like to thank everybody in the panel. I'd like to thank our keynote speakers in particular. I'd like to thank you, the audience, for tuning in. And clearly what we have here is a wonderful opportunity. The Build Back Better, Build Back Green mantra is actually all around the world. It's not just in Europe. But given what's been happening in China with electrification, and given the challenge that possibly has to the European auto industry, we have a golden opportunity, and in fact a duty, some could argue, to get on with it. We want to look after our auto industry. We want to help our established companies transition, and we want to nurture and develop the startups that we're seeing come here and work together, both for the benefit, as I said earlier, of air quality, but significantly, of course, to tackle and deal with climate change. So I hope you've enjoyed this session. I certainly have. I've learned a lot, and I'm glad that we've given everybody an opportunity to suggest perhaps a few things that may change in terms of bureaucracy to help us get there quicker. So for now, thank you for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you again, and we'll update you with lots more things to come over the coming months and years. But let's look forward to an exciting 2021. We haven't had the best of years past, but let's turn this year into something spectacular and special. So look after yourselves, stay safe, and we'll see you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, what a panel that was. Fantastic keynotes, but there's more. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock CET, we have the next session, which is skilling up fleet electrification. So that's going to be about what's the detail behind this? What sort of things do we need to put together? What are the skill sets, both training and other specific areas? So that's tomorrow, 10 o'clock CET. Please join us for that session, and I hope you'll learn a lot more on that one as well. So thank you, and see you tomorrow.